Why do some people feel an inner awakening, as if they have witnessed something that can never be forgotten, while others seem to live their entire lives without ever questioning? Why do some crumble under the weight of truth, losing their footing, their relationships, their sense of direction, while others deflect, mock, or fight against the very same truth as if it were a threat? What if this is no coincidence? What if awakening does not automatically mean healing, but first entails loss? Not peace, but fracture. Not elevation, but destabilization. And what if that is precisely why not everyone is meant for it? The spiritual world loves the notion that everyone will eventually wake up, that consciousness is a collective goal, a gentle ascent for humanity. Yet life tells a different story. History, psychology, and experience reveal truth is not neutral. It takes, it destroys certainties, it tears down identities before it can bear something new. Some people need illusion to remain stable. Others lose everything the moment the illusion falls. And perhaps awakening is not a destination for all. Perhaps it is an imposition, a burden, a task that not everyone can bear, and not everyone should. For not everyone is here to question the world. Some are here to hold it together. The idea sounds beautiful, almost too beautiful, that all people will one day awaken, that consciousness will spread evenly, that truth will ultimately reach, heal, and redeem everyone. This idea has inscribed itself deeply into modern spirituality. It promises meaning, it promises hope, and above all, it alleviates fear. For if everyone is meant to awaken, then awakening is not a risk. Then it is a safe path, and a collective ascent where no one is left behind. Yet this is precisely where the lie begins, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The thought that not everyone should awaken is hard to bear. It contradicts our desire for justice, for equality, for a cosmic plan that overwhelms no one. Yet reality, historical, psychological, existential, tells a different story. A glance into history reveals truth has never been something that is evenly distributed. In every era there have been few who questioned, and many who needed order. Prophets, mystics, thinkers, heretics were never the majority. They were exceptions, and almost always they paid a price. Not because they were better, but because they saw more than the system could bear. The majority of people did not change history, they stabilized it, not out of ignorance, but out of necessity. Societies do not function when everyone questions everything. They function through roles, through routines, through shared assumptions. Those who dissolve these assumptions do not only change themselves, they destabilize the whole. Psychologically speaking, this is not a failure, it is protection. The human psyche is not designed to be permanently confronted with existential truth. It needs structures of meaning, identities, narratives. Awakening means that these structures become fragile, that questions arise for which there are no simple answers. Who am I when my role falls away? What remains when my beliefs shatter? Why do I live when my goals prove to be empty? Not every person can sustain this state, and not every person should. Modern psychology confirms this, even if it calls it something else. Honestly, not everyone is ready for radical self-dissolution. Not every nervous system is stable enough to lose fundamental certainties. For some, awakening means not liberation, but disorientation, not clarity, but fear, not peace, but emptiness. That is why the idea that everyone should awaken sounds so comforting. It takes away the loneliness from the awakened. It gives the seeker a sense of security. It transforms an existential fracture into a spiritual promise. Yet, it is not true. Experience shows something different. People react differently to truth. Some become silent, some become open, some become hardened, some break apart, and many reject it, not out of ignorance but out of self-preservation. For truth is not just knowledge, It is loss. It takes away old identities. It takes away belonging. It takes away security. Not every person is here to lose that. Some are here to preserve, to carry on, to stabilize. Without them, there would be no continuity, no families, no societies, no order. The awakening of the few stands on the shoulders of the many who do not awaken. That is uncomfortable, and it contradicts the spiritual idealism of our time. But it is honest. The idea that everyone must awaken is often less truth than desire. The desire not to be alone. The desire for one's own experience to be validated. The desire for one's own pain to make sense. Yet, meaning does not arise from generalization. It arises from bearing it. Awakening is not an upgrade, it is a stripping bare. And not every person is here to stand naked before reality. Some need veils, and some need stories, some need routines, not as a flaw, as a function. The lie does not lie in the possibility of awakening. The lie lies in the belief that it is intended for everyone. Perhaps awakening is not a collective goal. Rather, it is an individual task. Perhaps it is not progress, but a burden that only a few can bear without breaking under its weight. And perhaps true maturity is not to believe that everyone should awaken, but to accept that consciousness takes on different forms, not higher, not lower, different. This chapter does not take away your hope. It takes away an illusion. And sometimes that is precisely the first step toward a truth that does not comfort, but carries. Truth is often portrayed as a remedy, as a light that clarifies everything, as a realization that liberates, organizes, redeems. Yet this notion is naive. Truth does not automatically heal. In many cases, it destabilizes first. Sometimes it even destroys what has held a person together internally. For truth is not an addition to an existing life. It is an intervention. Awakening does not mean learning something new. It means losing something old. And therein lies the danger. Every person lives within structures of meaning. Identity, values, roles, goals. These structures are not superficial. They are psychological support systems. They unconsciously answer questions like, who am I? Why do I live? What gives meaning to my suffering? What keeps me upright in the morning? When truth begins to question these answers, there is no peace, but emptiness. Awakening first tears away the ground before it can bear something new. The problem is not that truth is wrong. Nah. The problem is that not every person is internally stable enough to endure the in-between space, the space between what no longer holds true and what has yet to emerge. Psychologically speaking, this state is highly risky. When meaning collapses, the nervous system responds with alarm. Fear, disorientation, inner unrest do not arise because something is going wrong, but because protective mechanisms are activated. Human beings are not designed to live without meaning, and awakening destroys meanings. Old religious images, societal roles, familial expectations, personal life plans. What remains when all of this no longer supports us? For some, freedom emerges from this void, for others a chasm. Identity is not a luxury. It is a psychological necessity. When a person suddenly realizes that they have constructed their identity for decades out of conformity, fear, or conditioning, it can be liberating or devastating. For identity is not merely a mask, it is structure. It regulates behavior. It provides orientation. It creates belonging. When this structure falls away without something new to replace it, chaos ensues. That is why awakening is not an upgrade, but a deconstruction. And deconstruction is dangerous when it occurs faster than a person can integrate. Many people sense this unconsciously. They cannot name it. They do not speak of consciousness or awakening, but they react. With resistance, with mockery, with rejection, with aggression, or with complete withdrawal. Not because they cannot see the truth, but because their system knows. This truth would destabilize me. A person who derives their identity from achievement can hardly bear a truth that relativizes achievement. And any person who finds stability in fixed roles cannot integrate a truth that dissolves those roles. A person who needs order cannot bear the knowledge that exposes uncertainty. This is not a weakness. This is self-preservation. Awakening demands an inner capacity that is not granted to everyone. It requires emotional stability. It requires the ability to endure ambivalence. It requires the willingness to not have immediate answers. Many people function only because they have clear structures, clear rules, clear goals. If you take these away from them, not only does their worldview collapse, but their very lives. That is why truth is not neutral. It acts differently, depending on inner maturity, depending on life phase, depending on psychological resilience. In spiritual narratives, this is often romanticized. Yet true experience shows, not everyone who awakens becomes freer. Some become disoriented, some become depressed, some lose their relationships, some lose their will to live. Not because truth is wrong, but because it comes too early, or goes too deep, or encounters a system that is not ready. Many people sense this instinctively. They avoid silence, they avoid depth, they avoid questions, not out of superficiality, but out of protection. For truth cannot be measured out. It takes before it gives, and it only returns something to those who have learned to be with emptiness. That is why it is dangerous to sell awakening as a promise of healing. It is not a panacea, it is a transition that calls into question everything that previously provided security. For some, this is necessary. For others, it would be destructive. Perhaps truth is not dangerous in itself. Perhaps it is only dangerous when it encounters a life that cannot exist without its illusions. And perhaps true maturity does not lie in imposing the truth on others, but in recognizing who can bear it and who cannot. For awareness is not a duty. It is a burden that one must willingly carry, and many people feel very acutely. This burden would break me. This is not guilt. It is the wisdom of the system. Not every door is meant for everyone. Not every truth is meant for every life. Sometimes protection is more important than understanding, and sometimes not awakening is not a refusal, but a form of inner intelligence. This chapter does not instill fear. It explains it. And perhaps for the first time you recognize here why truth does not always liberate, but sometimes is exactly what a person must save themselves from. In many spiritual narratives, there is a quiet devaluation. The awakened here, the sleeping there. The former conscious, the latter blind. Yet this separation is not only wrong, it overlooks a deeper order. For systems, societies, and families cannot consist solely of questioners. They need stability, repetition, predictability, and for that, there are people who are not here to awaken. Every functioning structure is based on roles, not on the quest for truth, but on reliability. Societies do not emerge through constant questioning, but through agreements, rules, norms, routines. Without them, there would be no coexistence, no division of labor, no continuity. Adaptation in this sense is not a mistake. It is an achievement. A person who rises at the same time every morning, who goes about their work, who cares for family obligations and the everyday, contributes more to the stability of a system than someone who deconstructs everything but builds nothing. Unconsciousness is not the same as stupidity. Often it serves a function. Not every person is equipped to bear existential questions. Not everyone must explore the meaning of life to lead a meaningful life. Many people live embedded in roles that provide them with support, parenthood, profession, community, tradition. These roles are not illusions, but rather scaffolding that sustains. Those who shatter them without constructing something new leave chaos in their wake. That is why unawakened individuals are not the losers of the system. They are its foundation. Families need people who are present, not constantly questioning, but providing, holding, structuring. Children need security, not metaphysical doubts. Societies need people who function so that others can question. It sounds harsh, but it is real. A system in which everyone awakens would collapse. When no one believes in rules anymore, yet everyone depends on them, instability arises. When no one accepts roles anymore, yet everyone needs structure, disorientation ensues. Thus, different levels of consciousness exist not as a hierarchy, but as a division of labor. Some carry order. Some carry depth. Both are necessary. Not every person is here to remember. Some are here to preserve. Not everyone is here to question. Some are here to live. And that is no lesser task. Adaptation is often portrayed as weakness. Yet adaptation is evolutionarily sensible. It enables survival. It fosters cohesion. It reduces inner conflict. Any person who does not constantly question whether their life is right often lives more peacefully than someone who scrutinizes everything. Awakening brings depth, but also burden. Non-awakening brings simplicity, but also limitation. Both have their place. It only becomes problematic when some seek to convert others. When the awakened believe that everyone must awaken, violence arises. Psychologically, emotionally, socially. For one tears people from their structures without providing them with new ones. One destabilizes without taking responsibility. This is not a service to the truth, but an intrusion. Not every person is here to question their identity. Some are here to live it. Not everyone is here to endure emptiness. Some need fullness, routine, repetition. And that is not an escape, but a different mode of existence. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding in the spiritual scene is that consciousness is always higher. Perhaps it is simply different. A person who lives lovingly without awakening, who is there for others, who takes responsibility and finds meaning in the concrete, lives no less valuably than someone who sees through everything but can hold nothing anymore. Consciousness without grounding becomes corrosive. Unconsciousness without violence becomes sustaining. That is why every system needs both, the questioners and the holders, the shakers and the preservers. Not every person is here to see the matrix. Some are here to carry it, so that others can break through it. Perhaps non-awakening is not a refusal, but a task. And perhaps true wisdom is not to say everyone must awaken, but to recognize who plays which role, for not every person is here to carry the light. Some are here to build the house in which others can see themselves, and without them, everything would collapse. Awakening is often sold as a union, as a homecoming, as a state of deep connection with everything, and yes, on an inner level that is true. Yet on the human social level, the opposite often occurs. Awakening separates, not because one elevates oneself above others, but because perception shifts. Those who see differently live differently, and those who live differently no longer fit seamlessly into existing relationships. Intimacy arises not only from love, but from shared reality, from similar interpretations, similar priorities, similar self-images. When this shared reality shatters, distance emerges even when affection remains. Many people experience after an inner awakening not more connection, but a quiet drifting apart. Conversations feel shallow. Jokes no longer resonate. Problems suddenly seem foreign, not because one has become better, but because one hears differently. Perception alters intimacy. When someone begins to see patterns where others tell stories, friction arises. When someone recognizes illusions that provide others with security, silence ensues. When someone asks questions where others seek answers, distance grows. Awakening does not mean that one loves others less. Often one loves them even more deeply, but one can no longer play along in the spaces where one was once a part. That is the most painful part. For awakening takes nothing away from you that was inauthentic. but it takes much that was familiar. Friendships change. Family relationships shift. Partnerships come under strain, not because someone acts wrongly, but because perception does not remain in sync. An who awakens leaves behind an inner contract, the contract to interpret the world in the same way as others. And this contract is the foundation of most relationships. Many who awaken experience a paradox. They feel clearer within, yet lonelier on the outside. Not because they wish to isolate themselves, but because they can no longer arrive where they once arrived. Laughter still echoes, but it no longer feels directed at them. They are still present, but no longer truly involved. This creates a new kind of loneliness, not social loneliness, but existential. The loneliness of seeing differently and knowing that it cannot be explained. For awakening cannot be translated, it cannot be proven, it cannot be forced. And those who try lose even more closeness. That is why many who have awakened withdraw, not out of arrogance but out of protection. Protection from misunderstandings, protection from conflicts, protection from the constant feeling of being too much or too little. Many become quieter, more observant, more reserved, not because they feel less but because they perceive more. And this silence is often misunderstood as coldness, as arrogance, as distance. Yet in truth, it is often sorrow. Sorrow that closeness was conditional. Sorrow that love is often bound to shared illusions. Awakening does not only show you the world anew, it also reveals how deeply connection is tied to unconsciousness. That is hard to bear. Many report after awakening not of happiness but of emptiness. Not because something is missing, but because something has fallen away. The old self, the old role, and the old belonging, and the new has not yet arrived. Between these worlds lies isolation, a transitional zone where one can no longer go back and has not yet arrived. Here the greatest temptation often arises to adapt once more, to shrink back down, to play along again. Yet once one has seen, one can never fully forget, and those who try to deny themselves lose not only truth but also dignity. Awakening is not an ascent, but a farewell to collective dreams, a farewell to simple belonging, a farewell to the illusion of needing to be understood. And it is here that it is decided whether awakening leads to bitterness or to maturity. Isolation is not a goal, but it is often the price, not for truth, but for integrity. For eventually, after this phase, a new form of connection emerges, not through roles, not through masks, but through resonance. Fewer people, but genuine contact. Yet this space only opens up when one no longer fights against loneliness, but walks through it. Awakening separates because it separates you from illusions. And closeness, which was only possible through illusions, must go. Not because it was wrong, but because it had its time. Perhaps loneliness after awakening is not a sign of failure, but rather the proof that you have stopped abandoning yourself to belong. And perhaps that is the truest form of closeness that a person can achieve. There is a point within a person after which nothing will ever be the same again. No dramatic moment, no loud bang, no spiritual fireworks, but something much quieter. You can no longer pretend that you do not know. Some people call it awakening. Others call it crisis. Still others call it loss. Yet in truth, it is a transition that knows no return ticket. You do not recognize it by knowing more, but by the fact that you can no longer forget. Once you could distract yourself, function, fit in, accept the old explanations. Now that is no longer possible, not because you do not want to, but because your inner self no longer cooperates. You can no longer switch off, not in the sense of exhaustion, but in the sense of perception. You see patterns where once there were stories. You hear undertones where once there were only words. You feel dissonance where once there was normality. And even if you try to go back, something within you refuses to comply. That is one of the clearest signs. You can no longer be unconscious, not permanently, not credibly, not for yourself. Many still try. They tell themselves, I am exaggerating. I am imagining this. I should become normal again. But the old normal no longer exists, for awakening is not a state that can be turned on and off. It is a shift in perspective. You no longer stand in the same inner place. The second sign is subtler but deeper. You no longer feel at home. Not necessarily on the outside, not necessarily geographically, but existentially. You are there, but you are no longer embedded in the same self-evidence. Life feels stranger, the themes smaller, the dramas louder, the goals hollow. Not because they are objectively wrong, but because they no longer carry you. You feel a discrepancy between what matters and what is lived, and this discrepancy can no longer be ignored. Many describe this feeling as no longer fitting into this world, yet that is only the surface. Deeper beneath lies something else. You no longer fit into the collective agreement of interpreting reality in a certain way. You have stopped carrying certain lies, even the harmless ones. You can no longer admire success when it is empty. You can no longer celebrate security when it is based on repression. You can no longer enjoy belonging when it demands self-denial. This does not make you better, but it makes you different. And this difference is not chosen. It has happened. The third sign is the hardest. You realize that awakening is not an ascent. It is not a spiritual career path. It is not a reward. It is not a goal. Rather, it is a point of no return. Before, you may have believed that consciousness made everything easier, brighter, more peaceful. Yet now you notice it makes many things more honest, and thus at first heavier. You can no longer evade yourself. You can no longer deceive yourself. You can no longer cover up inner contradictions. The old game of soothing oneself with roles no longer works. And that is frightening. For without the old roles, emptiness arises, not the emptiness of lack, but the emptiness of transition, an emptiness in which the old no longer carries and the new has yet to be named. Many cannot endure this state. They try to fix it, to heal it, to spiritualize it, hinan, or to numb yourself. Yet this state is not a mistake. It is a sign that you can no longer go back, because what you were no longer aligns with what you have seen. Awakening does not mean that you are now more. It means that you have less illusion, and illusion was the glue that held much together. Without it, everything feels raw, more direct, sometimes merciless. Yet here lies the truth. You are not lost. You are unbound. Unbound from expectations that were not yours, from goals that did not nourish you, from affiliations that only held you as long as you held yourself back. Not being able to go back is not a loss of freedom. It is its beginning, even if it initially feels like the opposite. For freedom without illusion feels naked at first. Many ask at this point, what should I do now? Yet this question still belongs to the old way of thinking. Awakening does not ask about doing. It asks about being. Who are you when you no longer have to explain yourself? When you no longer conform? When you no longer hope to belong again? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are honest. And honesty is the true point of no return. For once someone has been honest with themselves, they can no longer credibly deceive themselves. Perhaps this is the true essence of awakening. Not that you see more, but that you no longer abandon yourself. And that is precisely why you cannot go back. Not because you shouldn't, but because you could not without losing yourself. And perhaps this is not a failure. Perhaps it is the moment when your life stops playing a role and begins to become true. Perhaps awakening is not a goal. Perhaps it is a task, and maybe not everyone is here to carry it, Perhaps you are not too sensitive, not too deep, not too different. Perhaps you have simply stopped abandoning yourself just to belong. If these words have touched something within you, if you have felt recognized, then you have not landed here by chance. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be part of a community that grows not louder, but more honest. Like this video so that these thoughts can reach others who still cannot place themselves. Share it if you know someone who is quietly carrying what hardly anyone sees. And now a sincere question for you, not for me, but for yourself. When did you first feel that you could no longer turn back inside? Write it in the comments. Here, truth is allowed to take space. Spirit to spirit. Your Zeitgeist.